Everyone. On behalf of the Women's International Forum Executive Board, please receive a very warm welcome to our December event. It's the last of the year, but not the last of our season, so we hope to see you all on January 2. My name is Lina Fernandez. I'm the co-vice president of WIF, and thank you for joining us today for the conversation with Zainab Salbi, a celebrated humanitarian, author, and journalist. Oprah Winfrey identified her as one of the 25th women changing the world to People magazine, and Foreign Policy magazine included Zainab on the top 100 global thinkers. She's also the founder and former CEO of Women for Women International, an author of a few books, including the national bestseller Between the Two Worlds and her latest Freedom is an Inside Job. She is also the creator and host of several shows, including Me Too, Now What, on Public Broadcasting Service, and Through Her Eyes with Zainab Salbi at Yahoo News. She is currently the host of Redefine podcast, Chief Awareness Officer at Fine Center, and co-founder of Daughters for Earth. Before giving the floor to Sarina, who is leading the conversation with Zainab today, I would like to give a few words about our organization. WIF is a speakers forum that was established in 1975, and since then we have been organizing interactive dialogues on key global issues related to the work of the UN and multilateralism, to offer a variety of perspectives and to help deepen the understanding of the matters. WIF Executive Board, which does the work, is made up from professional women of different member countries of the UN. Please remember to mute your microphones. Thank you. In concrete, we have members from Singapore, Mauritius, Belgium, Paraguay, South Africa, Slovakia, Canada, Ecuador, and the US, and Colombia, which is me. And our membership includes women from New York and the diplomatic world. If you haven't joined us, please email us to womeninternationalforum@gmail.com, and we will email you the form, or please visit our website where you can find all the information too. We encourage you to do it, and we hope to see you in January. Without further ado, please, Sarina, our president, I would like to give you the floor so you can start the conversation.
Thank you very much, Lina, for that. So Zainab, once again, a warm welcome to the Women's International Forum. We are really honored that you have accepted our invitation. As Lina pointed out, and as many of you would already know, Zainab Salbi is a celebrated humanitarian, author, and journalist, and Lina has spoken extensively about her achievements. I just want to start to give a little bit more details about the organization that she started, Women for Women International, which is a grassroots humanitarian and development organization dedicated to serving women survivors of wars by offering support, tools, and access to life-changing skills to move from crisis and poverty to stability and economic self-sufficiency. And under her leadership as the organization's CEO from 1993 to 2011, Women for Women International grew from helping 30 women upon its inception to more than 500,000 marginalized women in 8 conflict areas. It also distributed more than 120 million in direct aid and microcredit loans that impacted more than 1.7 million families. So Zainab, perhaps we can start from there. You were very young. You were 23 years old only when you started Women for Women International. What prompted you to do this at such a young age, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure, first of all, to be in your company and a true honor. And I want to particularly thank my friend Sally Thompson for making the introduction and bringing me here in your company. Great seeing you, Sally, and nice meeting everyone and nice seeing everyone. As Irina mentioned, I was 23 years old when I started Women for Women International, but there were also circumstances and, or maybe not actually, but I grew up in Iraq. What prompted me to do it is because I grew up in Iraq and during Saddam Hussein's regime. And that by definition meant that, I am sorry, do you hear the construction around me, or is it in your, is it okay?
It's fine. We don't hear any construction. However, I did hear some small voices earlier. So just a quick reminder, please, everyone else, can you just mute your microphones? Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad you're not hearing construction. It's probably the workers outside. But so as I said, I grew up in Iraq, and in Baghdad, Iraq, and that was during Saddam Hussein's regime. And that meant I grew up in fear. Now, my family knew him. We were his social friends. I think that is not a choice. My father was his pilot. He was the head of civil aviation, the Iraqi civil aviation. And we were very close friends to him. We were his social friends, not political ones, which meant that I grew up seeing him every weekend in my life, and especially in my teenage life. And my life was revolved around his needs. I had no friends. I was not allowed to have any friends without being approved or censored or any of these things. And that is in a way impacted a lot of what I saw of the world. And the impact of that is three things actually. One is I grew up, being afraid to express my opinion. It was illegal to express your opinion. You can go to prison, and you could kill your family if you say a most benign thing. And he actually did kill his best friends, and most definitely his family members, for saying the wrong thing, for saying a joke, for feeling anything. So you grew up in that environment where you're seeing the adults are scared. Frankly, the whole country was scared. Everyone was spying on each other. And so that fear, and thankfully, I knew the fear, but I also knew about the injustice. And partially because I went to a normal school, not the palace school. That was small ways of my parents resisting. It's when you're in that environment, you resist in small ways. You don't resist in big heroic rebellion ways. And their resistance was to send me to a local school as opposed to the palace school. And so I could see classmates who were talking about public executions, and were talking about imprisonment, and were talking about all kinds of things, while at night I was actually with Saddam, and we're eating caviar and the best of food. And it's a child's mind, perhaps. I don't know. I can't take credit for it, except I can tell you, I knew as a child there was a discrepancy, that there was an injustice, and there was obliviousness at that injustice and it's dangerous to talk about it by the leadership. And I was a child witnessing that. And so that stayed with me. So it's what, my best friend was a Kurdish and talked to me about the Kurdish massacre. But these are things are like you whisper, and you're like scared to even tell your parents about it, because you know that it will endanger them. The second thing that impacted me, and this is all impacts my work, I came to believe that these are how we grow up in, and what we actually even do is a reflection of perhaps of our own desire to address some of the things consciously or unconsciously of what we have grown up with. The second thing is war. I grew up in the Iran-Iraq war. I was 11 years old when that happened. And again, as a child, I would notice that the news were only talking about men in war, soldiers and the politicians and the tanks and the planes and all of that. And that's the news, But as a child of war, everyone in my life was a woman, running the show. The teachers, the doctors, the policewomen, my mother, of course. The streets were full of women running the show and keeping life going. And, some of you may know, war does not mean that we're all stuck in a bunker. We were having birthdays and falling in love, and, all the life, it keeps going, and you go to school and the whole idea. But that keeping of life was run by women. And again, a child innocence. This came from a child innocence in me, saying the world is talking about war as if it's only men in it. And no one is talking about war, where there are women running the show in the backline discussions and decisions and all of that. And no one is giving credit for women or even showing their voices. And so that, again, stayed with me. And then the third thing that stayed and impacted my childhood, and it's all a long way, Zarina, to answer your question, actually, but these are the truth, is my mother. And again, I said, the resistance I come to believe happens not only in big heroic ways, it sometimes happens in small heroic ways. And my mother, who was imprisoned in this, we were all imprisoned in that, atmosphere of fear. She would tell me, I wrote it in my memoir, a lot of these stories. She would say, I am in the prison and in the prison bar, and I can't prove to anybody of their existence, but I see the prison bars and they are golden and I'm in it. And so there's a big struggle that here we are stuck in this fear. But what this woman did to me, my mom, made two things. Made me read all kinds of books on women's rights as a teenager. Not only women's rights, on injustices around the world. She made me read Roots when I was 13 years old. And she would make me read all kinds of feminist books. And she would tell me about women's rights. And I'm so grateful for her. She's no longer with us. And I'm so grateful for her. She's like, that's such a good gift to give a child, right? Like set them up in the right direction. And the second thing she would tell me, you must be strong. You must be independent. Never let anybody touch you or talk to you in the wrong way. And that stayed with me. Long story short, how I got to start Women for Women was all of these reasons. I had been in America. I had now live in now I live in the land that I can express myself without fear. And wow, you can say your opinion and no one will punish you or kill you. And I saw 3 years upon my arrival in America, saw that there was another war of a country I don't know, but women were in rape camps and concentration camps, and that was Bosnia and Herzegovina at the time, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I felt, now I live in a land that allows me to express myself. And I felt and still feel responsible as a human being to act when I see injustice. For I believe that when we avoid seeing and talking about injustices, when we do this and this, we legitimize it and allow for the corruption of our own values. Because we each think we are good people, but what's good if we see injustice and look the other direction? So for me, it came from that there's something wrong. I don't know anything about Bosnia. I didn't know anything about that country at all, nothing. But I was living in a country that allowed me to act. So then I must take advantage of that opportunity. And that's how Women for Women International started. I had no money. I had no experience. I had already escaped an abusive arranged marriage and remarried to another wonderful guy. My family was in Iraq stranded. Like, I had nothing. And every friend of mine laughed at me, said, go and get yourself a decent job so you can buy a house and get a car and build your home, except my, at that time, husband, who believed, and he said, I'm going to support you. And that's how we started Women for Women International, with nothing. And as Zarina just said, it ended up helping directly 420,000 women, raising $146 million, connecting half a million women from 68 countries, mostly in America, to women survivors of wars. And here's a summary. If I could do that with no money, no experience, no family to support me, nothing. I was stranded in this country with $400 in my pocket when I first arrived, or when I left my abusive husband. And if I could do that, I believe we can all do whatever we set our minds to. And I believe in making the impossible possible. And I believe there's no distinction between anybody, any dream, the distinction perhaps in the perseverance or the insistence, but there's nothing special about me except my determination that I must do this, and my commitment. And that was the only thing. And so that's the story. And I'm sorry, it's a long way to question, answer.
It's a wonderful, wonderful story. And you're being too modest. You can't say there's nothing special about you, because it's really a courageous journey that you embarked on. Hearing you speak, I have two questions for you. One, when you evoked, the memory of your growing up in Iraq with your mother and the ladies of the family, you rightly pointed out that no one talks about war or conflict from a woman's perspective, or the children's perspective. And yet it is really the other side of the coin. So my question for you from there is, how can we shine a light to girls and women's experience in conflict and peace building? Number two, when I read your story and did some research, I was so struck by how you moved from advocacy to action. I mean, there are a lot of people who advocate for things, but to move from there to actually taking concrete action is really incredible, to touch people's lives as you have. So can you share with us some initiatives that you started and where you were able to see impact on the lives of women and girls?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I think, it's so amazing because here we are and at the end of 2021, and there are still more men in leadership positions around the world who do not understand why we need to incorporate women's voices in decision-making and in the negotiatings of war and peace. And honestly, some of these men are my friends. I love them, right? And they still ask me the question, I just don't get it. Why do we need to invite women to this negotiating table to end the war in Syria or whatever country? I mean, so it's frustrating for me. So I was like, for me, I was like, what are we doing wrong, honestly, that they still don't get it? And I don't mean to generalize men. I mean, I just was in an event yesterday in New York City where they're, the head of PayPal and the Prime Minister of Albania got award for their work on women's issues. So I'm not, but we have more men than we have, there should be in 2021 who are not understanding why. So we need to honestly, and I'm really sharing with you from my heart, improve our arguments, because we do have the data. We do. If women are part of negotiating peace and war, or frankly, any negotiating, but in my case, it's peace and war, or now Daughters for Earth is all about climate change, frankly, and again, if we have the data, if women are part of these negotiations, the agreements has has whatever percentage higher, 30%, I believe, up to 30% better rate of success. We have, it lasts longer, it's more incorporated, the society, we have the data, okay? Yeah. Maybe we need to get more data, I don't know. Maybe we need to improve our arguments, frankly, because they're not getting it. And then we have to reflect, so they said, you give us the data, we got the data. So now we need to make the argument. And part of the things that gets in the way, I think, is that, women express themselves in different ways than men, so, I was just very involved in the Afghanistan evacuation, right? When you say we need Afghan women part of their negotiations of what happens, all of that, not all women are going to be expressing themselves in the fact and whatever like men. And there needs to be some tolerance. So that's the third point, is that some tolerance to really listen to other expressions. We tend to be, maybe we express ourselves in more emotional ways. That is fine. That should not be a bad thing. That is a good thing. Maybe we express ourselves more about needs and children. That is not a secondary thing. That is a primary thing. So one is we need better data, perhaps more, not better, more. Second is we need, to improve our arguments, perhaps, some women are starting to talk about perhaps we need to reposition the issues and make it about family. I don't know, honestly. I do know if we haven't done the improvement until now, then we've got to reassess and re-strategize. Yeah. And then the third one is, we really do need to educate, truly. It's not only the slogan, get more women at the negotiating table. We do need to emotionally educate men in leadership positions why this makes sense. And that is upon all of us as in personal and professional relationships, to educate them. This is, it's like you're speaking with someone with a different language, and you say, just because they speak in a different language doesn't mean that they're less smart, right? They're just expressing themselves in a different language. And sometimes there needs to be a tolerance for that women from different educational background, I'm not talking about, it could be an uneducated woman, but she's smart and influencer, and we need to put her in the negotiating table, right? So these are the things that we need to work on, and we're not there. The second part of your question, Tell me again, I'm trying to
No, I was talking about your journey from being an advocate to an activist.
action. Yes. Well, I've always been an action person, honestly, from day one. I mean, in Bosnia, I attended one demonstration and then 10, and then, I attended all the silent demonstrations and the civil disobedience demonstrations. And then at one point, and I was like a kid at that time, 22, 23, I was like, okay, well, what I need to do something. This demonstration is just not working for me. So I've always been an action-oriented kind of person. Now, that doesn't mean I have really come to appreciate all the players in all the touch points, right?
Yeah.
Some of us are better as advocates. Some of us are better as demonstrators in the streets, like, all of it. Some of us are better inside, in our suits, in the negotiating tables. Some of us are better on the ground, mobilizing humanitarian aid. And I was sort of not understanding that, to be honest. I was sort of putting value on this. It's better to help people directly than this. Please don't demonstrate. Until I met a woman in Iraq. It's my home country, but I also went as a humanitarian there. And she was demonstrating and she was saying all kinds of and this was right after the invasion of Iraq. And here we are trying to get women more in the decision-making power. And she was going on radio saying women should, take over their hijab and have the freedom of expression in their choosing their husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And I was like, and the religious people were going crazy. Well, I went to her and I was like, what are you doing? You're like, we need to negotiate in here. And you're saying these radical things. It's scaring these guys from us. So please, can you calm down in here? So it was like a sister to sister. And she said, and she really, I'm grateful for her. She said, Zainab, I am the loud person who is on the side of the streets screaming. So people like you who are more in the middle can be invited in the because they will see you as more the moderate. So you need to understand this is all part of the advocacy. And I'm grateful for her. She opened my eyes for a new way of looking at it. So recently, for example, I was in Afghanistan. I was very involved in the Afghan evacuation, as I'm sure many of you have been, right? And it was a beautiful demonstration of that because there was a coalition of women got formed, informally, like it was just like we got together when we realized there was no plan, none, to evacuate women leaders who are targeted for assassination by the Taliban, who have been killed in the last year by the Taliban, who we know. I personally have lost many friends in Iraq and Libya and Syria, for assassination. The minute their voices are different and advocating for something that makes these militias uncomfortable, right? So we got all of these coalition and we raised money to evacuate the women, to charter our own planes to evacuate. But in the meantime, we started talking with each other, right? So I would go to the groups who are radical left and saying, we need to demonstrate in the street. Can you please organize this? Got it. Demonstrated in the streets. Actually, one of the demonstrations were in front of the UN. Then we talked to the more advocacy policy groups. We need to, start advocating on policy change. And we start talking with each other informally and formally, but in way of almost creating waves. The wave of the demonstrator, the wave of the policymakers, the wave of the humanitarians, the wave of the evacuation. And that's it's the first time in my life. I've been in the women's space for 30 years now. First time I saw and witnessed a true sisterhood. We're all sisters. We talk about that, but women's groups tend to compete with each other and sometimes we elbow each other. That's the truth as well, right? It was the first time that we all got together, did not make judgment that my work is better than your work. We realized all of the work is important and we need to push from inside and we need to push from outside and we need to push from the middle. And we did it. We did it. And those who said, so-and-so does not like me, or I don't like this group, everyone put that aside and we realized we have a much bigger agenda, and it was urgent and important and right now to push on. And it really brought us together in ways that we have not. And I hope it becomes a turning point, because I do believe we as women need to do two things. One is find a better way of collaborating, because the stakes are too high. I started Daughters for Earth because I realized 2 cents out of every dollar on environmental justice goes to women. We are still very marginalized. We are still not in power. And the Afghan evacuation showed it in my face, in all of our face, that we are not a priority. Men in US government, it wasn't like Taliban. We are not the priority. So we need to collaborate and come together. And I believe we need to find a new way of leading from a feminine, what I call feminine leadership, not emulating masculine way of leadership, which we all have it in us because that's the society and the culture we grew up in and we are trained in. We need to find our unique voice and lead from that unique voice of our feminine values. And if there's one thing I'm coming to learn, that finding our unique voice and leading with that is not easy. It gets rejected, it gets screamed at, it gets looked down at the beginning. But if I stay in my integrity and commitment to that new voice and a new way of leading my life, my advocacy, I have come to witness everyone comes around a full circle, maybe in a year later, maybe 10 years later, but everyone comes around full circle and say, I am so sorry for doing this and this and this to you. I am apologizing, and here I am with you in the new path. And so it's not easy to find our new voice, but it is a must as a way to pave the path for a new century, because this century, we must make it the feminine century. Not feminine.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that expression.
Our humanity is at stake, basically, if we don't do that. So, and that's upon each one of us to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, you have given us so many things to think about, and what I like about what you said was that there is room for everyone. You gave the example of the women in Iraq. Yes, everybody feels differently and comes from a different angle to the table on different issues. So it's good to have different voices, and it's also good to move from advocacy or demonstration to action, like you mentioned. I just want to say at this point that I'm sure there are many people in the audience who have lots of questions for you, and I really like to give them the opportunity to ask the questions, although I myself have many more questions. So I just want to put it out there that if anyone wants to ask a question, please, as usual, indicate your name in the chat function, and I'll call you as I see your name on the list. So while waiting for questions, I want to pick up on something you mentioned. You talked about Daughters for Earth. It's another foundation organization that you started, and you rightly pointed out that women do not get much of the money that goes into climate action. The UN has pointed out that investing in women is one of the strongest weapons for solving climate change and improving human resilience. How do the initiatives of Daughters of Earth support this objective?
Well, thank you, Zarina, for that question. Honestly, I am not a climate change expert whatsoever. I'm a citizen who cares, of course, about Earth, trying my best to be value-driven in my life. I have an electric car, I buy ethical clothes, I do all of these basic things that they tell us to do, right? I recycle, all of these things. But other than that, I'm like, I don't know what else to do. And I always sort of climb. I mean, I try my best in my personal life. I have my compost, all of these basic things. But I thought the decision and the change is coming because so far the messaging of the decision and the change is coming from the big leadership of political and on corporate leader, right? And as a citizen, I can only do what's available for me is X, Y, and Z of actions, right? As I mentioned that, Well, when I got a call by Jody Allen, and it's like, we need to mobilize women at the grassroots level for climate change. And I was like, I'm not an expert, but let me research. And here's what I found. One, climate change is going to impact, it is impacting women the most. I mean, I feel so frustrated, honestly, because it's like the story doesn't change. You know, we make such progress and the story doesn't. 70 to 80% of women or people who are going to be displaced by climate change, and displacement is going to be the #1 crisis of climate change. It's going to impact women, right? So, okay, we know it's going to impact the women the most. A lot of women, second, a lot of women, and I'm not talking about policy women, who, by the way, is still led by a lot of men. The deputies are all women. A lot of the deputies are women, but COP26, it was led by men. The panels were men. I mean, it's like the same story, right? I mean, just like, it's just frustrating. But anyway, and I hope you understand, I really am not attacking men. I love them.
I'm with you on this. Don't worry. I say the same thing. We're not attacking men. We want to cooperate.
Exactly. I was just like, please. I mean, why do we have to make that argument, you know, in 2021, about to go to 2022, you know? So then the deputies are women, but the leadership, all men. So, okay. So the voices of the women who are being impacted is not there for sure, right? These women, and then what I discovered, and this is, by the way, again, I operate out of a very, more like, I don't know climate change, so let me research climate change. It's like, not I'm an expert. I discovered that there are massive efforts, women-led efforts on the grounds, grassroots, all over the world, to actually protect their lands, biodiversity, to preserve the land, to like do all the things that the scientists are saying, which is we need to preserve 50% of Earth, we need to move to regenerative agriculture, and we need to move to renewable energy. And there are so many women-led efforts. Some of them are doing it intuitively, because it's simply impacting their livelihood and their children, you know, as in protecting their lands from corporate encroachments in a lot of indigenous lands, you know, in the Americas, you know, for example, as in, you know, women-led anti-poaching units in Zimbabwe and different parts of Africa to protect biodiversity from poachers who are led by men. You know, it's like things that these are women are doing it on the ground intuitively and just to fight for their, and they're getting 2%. They're getting no money. I mean, we're talking about such little resources going to them. It is absolutely ridiculous. So it's like, oh my God, here is the crisis again. I'm impacted, no resources, doing the bulk of the work. No one is talking about them, right? Then I started talking with women on this end. And what I realized is that women on this end are very angry and frustrated, saying no one is talking with us or to us, right? Again, climate change is a political thing and corporate thing, but I plant the trees, I recycle, I do the and what else? Tell me. So here's Daughters for Earth. It's mobilizing $100 million, of which we have secured $30 million so far. And this is only 4 months ago, right? Started to basically do two things. One, asking every woman to be part of the solution. So every one of you can actually join Daughters for Earth, and you can donate $10 to help preserve 10 square meter of land, right? So it's a fund. Your $10 go to that fund, basically. And we so far got, you know, foundations and privates, and we're now working with different companies to give a larger sums of money. Again, 10 million, 5 million, 1 million, depends on different things, right? So that money goes into the fund. The fund, then we have already identified more than 40 women's led efforts around the world, and we're now aiming at 100, and then all of that and increasing, but mapping who are these women around the world. And honestly, simply said, put more money in their hands. And some of it is as simple as $5,000, $10,000, and some of it, no, you need $100,000, $200,000. But it's sort of mobilizing people on this end who have resources to put money into the fund then put money into the hands of every woman. And so a person like me who doesn't have too much money, but I said Women for Women and asking every woman to support one woman at a time by giving her $30 a month for a year, because I could only do that, right? So it's the same thing in here. Is I don't have that much money, but I want to lead the fight for climate change. And here's the last one. Women, according to the UN and the World Bank, own maximum 10% of land and earth. The scientists are saying we need to preserve 50% of land and earth. So here's the punchline. I am asking every woman to take the leadership in taking back the land, to protect it and to preserve it. We have been marginalized from land ownership. We're being impacted the most. So let us take the lead in fighting for land and taking land, but we are not going to develop it. We're going to protect it. And it's a part of our duties for Mother Earth, and daughters, all of us are daughters. And the last thing, I almost died a couple of years ago, and I end up spending a lot of time in nature. And I feel, this is personal for me, I owe it to nature. I owe it to Mother Earth to do everything possible to protect it. Because when I was dying, because your nervous system is more frail, than when you live in the city every day and you're moving. It was every tree and every wave and every plant that I felt was cheering from me and saying, you can do it, you can live, you can walk, you can breathe again. And I feel as women, we really, really need to take the lead in protecting our earth. I mean, we are more connected to it than anybody else, and we need to do that. So if you have any thoughts, partnerships, if you know any groups who you want funding, if you know any corporation or the UN or anybody who wants to partner, this is, please do let me know. I truly would welcome it and love it. And this is all, basically, this is above, it's not saying we're just trying to put more money in the hands of more women, to fight for Earth.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Zainab. And I'm pretty sure that we have a lot of room for collaboration and cooperation with you and with the Daughters for Earth grassroots organization. We have several people who have indicated they have questions, and I really like to give them the floor. We first have Hala Jabir, and then we have Missy Rainey, and followed by Tracy. So Hala, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Zarina, for organizing this. And it's a pleasure. Good morning, Zainab, and thank you for your talk and the light and how you started your work and your journey. And of course, I can very much relate to the background, because we both come from the same country, Iraq. I grew up, I was born and raised, it was under Saddam Hussein, and I can relate very much with how she mentioned the freedom, and there was no freedom in the woman. I lost my father, I was 5 years old, so I was raised by my mom, and I saw that while growing up under Saddam, under a dictatorship, and it was my mom just raising me by herself, how the structure, the social structure of the country and the dictatorship, how it was difficult on daily basis, being on her own and raising a child. So I can relate to all that and understand. Now, going back to women, Zainab, of course, I'm very proud of you, and I admire all the work you've done and all the accomplishments that you did. I was wondering, and there was a question always, has there anything done for women? Women has gone through a lot in Iraq under Saddam from all perspective, wars, dictatorships, widows, their husbands, boys in wars, they lost. Has there anything been done, organization, internationally, some support to recognize these women or to have assistance to them, not from the government, but from the outside world? That's the first part. The second part is, of course, what Yazidi women have gone through after the fall of Saddam and ISIS in Iraq and all that. They've been kidnapped, slaved, their fathers, brothers, they were killed. And there were a lot of stories we hear on BBC. We still learn that there are many still hostages. So I was wondering, what can we do to help these Yazidis women? They've been going through a lot of trouble. There were reports that they had children from ISIS while they were captives. They had to be forced to leave their children to go back to their families in town. I was just wondering, how can I be involved? Because it's really heartbreaking stories. And how can we help? What can we do, Zainab? Thank you so much.
First of all, Hala, thank you so much. I do appreciate everything you said and take it to my heart. So thank you very, very much. I think there are two things. I mean, I'm assuming both your questions were about Iraq. The truth is, there are lots of women's organizations. I mean, Women for Women is still operating in Iraq. You know, there's Yanar Muhammad. There's a lot of women's efforts. It's not enough. You know, and is it making a dent? Maybe to a certain extent, you know, and in the personal lives, everything makes a difference. But what we do need, you know, so yes, there is a lot of efforts happening. They're all micro efforts. And two comments on this one is, one is, frankly, we need to impact the leadership. I don't know how, if you know anybody, you know, I'm speaking with women here I mean, I learned so much from Sally of how to navigate the system to impact discussions, but we do need to impact the discussion. And again, I was listening to the Prime Minister of Albania yesterday he got an award from Vital Voices for opening Albania to welcome 1,000 Afghan women leaders and their families, while all NATO members, or most of them, closed their doors to accepting anybody. And the award was not for that only, but 70% of his cabinet are women, which I did not know about Albania, right? And he says, you know, I can't take credit for that. And he quotes Margaret Thatcher, which is not necessarily my favorite woman, but he says, there's apparently a famous saying by her, which she says, if you want to hear people speak, talk to men. If you want to get things done, talk to women. So he said, I'm quoting him, right? He said, I need to get something done. So I had to make sure 70% of my cabinets are women to make things done. I was like, that's a good logic, you know, it's like, okay, basic, because it's true, by the way, you know, so that shift in Iraq has not happened. I mean, if anything, we're struggling in so many levels, right? But we do need, so there is, yes, of course, there's a humanitarian intervention and the civil society intervention and all of that, but we really do need to, I would say, lobby every government to make that shift and to show governments like Albania or Rwanda or other countries, see what they're doing, see why their leadership saying that, see what the impact on that. One. Second, we women don't have, in my opinion, enough. It's like we have some, but we don't have enough support system. And I mean support system, meaning when we go out into leadership, you know, everyone, it could be everyone here. It's not easy because we're still navigating a space we're still navigating our power in that space. We're still navigating our voice. And we need to have more support system for mentorship, for support, for holding each other's back. That I believe we actually, if anything, need more of it, you know? So that's it's not there. In Iraq, the ones who give me absolute hope and keep me going in believing it is young women and young men. They are breaking the code. They're breaking the system. They're breaking the mold, rather, you know, and they're free thinkers, and they are not willing to obey by the rules that we grew up with, you know, and they are free thinkers. I mean, you can agree with them, you don't have to agree with them, but they are free thinkers, and they make me believe, you know, in that. So I'm putting right now all my energy in the young people, you know, in Iraq, just because I have more hope from them, you know. Now, again, this is sort of an Iraqi thing, I mean, and a Syrian thing. We do have ISIS babies, as it's called, you know. It's so many, not only Yazidi, but Muslim women who have been impregnated by ISIS members and have children. And this is what I mean by masculine versus feminine. Again, the masculine and the feminine could be in both of us, but masculine way of leading versus feminine. So there's a debate inside of Iraq right now by young people who are basically saying, instead of imprisoning these mothers and their sons and putting them in camps, we actually need to take them out, bring their babies and them to our homes, love them as they are ours. This is Iraqi voices, it's not, you know, mine. You know, I'm not, this is not it's not my original. And they're like, we need to love them and raise them as they are ours, because if we do that, we change the narrative of the society. If we keep them in camps and keep them isolated and treated as terrorists, you know, some of them, most of them, frankly, these women were forced to, you know, marry and do all kinds of things with, and whatever, be impregnated by ISIS. And they're like, if we keep them in their camps and we keep their children in the camps, we will raise enemies, basically. And it's the same from Afghanistan. You know, it's like 10 years ago, I was testifying in a Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. And I was testifying as a humanitarian. It was, how do we end the war in Afghanistan? And I was like, you want to end the war peacefully, help them get a better life. You know, build more schools, build more roads. You know, it's cheaper than sending the army, you know. And there was the guy next to me, and he got all the attention, and the discussion went to him. He's a military expert. And he said, I'm going to tell you as it is, we need to kill as many Taliban as possible. That is the way we win the war. Well, we put trillions of dollars of money in the army and the military and all of that. And we killed as many Taliban as possible. And what did we gain? Nothing. Nothing. We lost the war, we lost lives, we lost money, we lost Afghanistan. And it's the same thing, but that whole attitude that instead of imprisoning these women in these horrible camps and their babies, whether they're Yazidis or Muslims, we need to bring them home, love them, talk, raise them as our families, as a way to pave another path. And that is not happening, Hala. That is not happening. And that includes Yazidis. And in terms of the Yazidis, part of their hurt is that there wasn't the stand up, you know, among Muslims of saying, you are our brothers or sisters and we are here for you. There wasn't. There was some support, mostly from Europe and America, but there wasn't, it's not enough. There's some in Iraq, but we need to increase that presence of saying, we are all one. We're all one country, one people, and we're not going to say just because you're Yazidi and not Muslim, we're not going to treat you any differently. And that narrative, unfortunately, has not happened. And if I feel more than anything, that's the narrative we need to introduce in the country for the future healing of it.
Thank you so much for that, Zainab and Hala. Missy had a question. I'm not sure if she's still. Okay,
I'm still here. My video doesn't work, but I'm going to.
Perfect. We hear you well.
I'm going to say it a little differently. I spent some time in Iraq under Saddam, and I've spent a lot of time in in Afghanistan under Karzai and Ashraf Ghani. I was interested, I was really sort of interested in sort of your coordinated efforts to get women leaders out of Afghanistan, but I'm going to preface that by saying that on several of my visits to Afghanistan, when things seemed to be going in the right direction, I was often the person that had to do the interview with the head of the Department of Women's Affairs, who was always a very capable person. And there was a Department of Women's Affairs, but they had no budget. So as a result of trying to accomplish anything, constantly had to go to the other ministries controlled by men to plead with them for standing and for getting programs done. So I'm just sort of interested in two things in terms of women in positions visibly where we see them, but do they have the resources, or is it window dressing? And then second of all, I'd love to just hear a little bit about the coordination of getting women leaders out of Afghanistan.
So the best model I found in my experience, and others in here may have more experience also, but the best model for me on how do you not make the gender budget of any government as a marginalized, pennies, breadcrumbs, but make it as a mainstream throughout, is actually came from Rwanda. And because what the Ministry of Gender did, and this was, I don't know if anybody worked in Rwanda, it was the former minister Aloysia Nyumba, who unfortunately passed away since. What she did not say, this is my ministry, and then created a budget. What she said, I actually want a budget in every ministry in the government. So she created an office in the military ministry, in this foreign secretary, in development, in business, and everything. And she negotiated her budget across all ministries and made sure that she planted her representatives across all ministry. And the role what she made is the role of the gender ministries to impact all of these ministries' budgets, basically. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant strategy that I've heard of, because and this is what I'm saying, is that we need to change our strategy. I think this whole idea that give me money for my ministry and I'm going to make impact, or give me money from my organization and I'm the best in impact. I think that we really, this evacuation of Afghanistan taught me that we really need to do it differently, because we're getting breadcrumbs, basically, that's the truth. But if we start looking across and strategizing across and not worrying about whose budget is the money is going to, but really start talking with each other across, that may be the way to go. And Missy, to answer your question, I really believe that Rwanda, what Minister Aloysia, I don't know if it's still the case, this was more than 10 years ago, but I do know that worked, because she made sure that there's levers in every across all the cabinets, and not only hers, and she changed the power dynamic of that. In terms of your second question, in terms of the evacuation, it created that coalition. I mean, we literally were working with, it's an informal coalition. We raised about $15 million together. I'm the founder of Women for Women. I sent more resources and more funding to Vital Voices than I sent to Women for Women, simply because they were in charge of evacuation, and Women for Women was going to stay in the country and look for models to stay and operate in the country with women over there. So it was really, what I love about it is that we each stepped away from our boundaries and saying we need to shift because we have a different priority. So it's created a coalition with formally and informally with women inside the government, inside NATO, inside the White House, inside the State Department. We were talking with these women who, some of them risked their jobs for us, for evacuating women. And all the women's groups, which otherwise were polite in conferences and summits, hey, how are you? We started calling each other every single day and putting our resources and not competing on resources and collaborating every single day. I mean, I miss, honestly, as hard as these days work, because we were working 24/7, I miss talking with these women leaders, who some of them were rivalries, every single day. We became like friends, and we crashed and emotionally cried and all of that in front of each other, and held that space for each other in the process. So that is another thing that happened, is it showed a loyalty, it showed showed the power of women, let's say it this way. I mean, there was one moment in which I needed to get one Afghan woman from this terminal to this terminal, the Ministry of Economy to be specific, in the Afghan airport. And I was like scrambling, and someone's like, here's someone in NATO, call her. High up, I don't even know who this woman, I just called her, I was like, I need to get this minister. And she's like, got it. And so it was a beautiful coalition of women. And so on the one hand, that's in number one, made me believe in truly the power of women. When we put our act together and roll our sleeves, we can get, I don't want to say any bad words in the morning, but we can get stuff done. I really believe wow, we can get stuff done. Second, it highlighted the idea that in the governments, and all governments, and most particularly, I know because I know more about that, the US government, we were not prioritized. Evacuating of Afghan women leaders and supporting women efforts was not prioritized. And it was really a devastating reality for all of us. That, oh my God, we have a president who gave great speeches on International Women's Day for years now. And when push comes to shove, we were on the side. I mean, I can cry talking about it. That was a very devastating reality for all of us. Like, oh my God. So, which means that we need to regroup, and we need to reorganize how we go about in the coming decades in terms of women's issues, because the past have led us to a certain extent, have got us to the good speeches, but did not get us to the good action. So we need to push much more. The third, Missy, if you had asked me that question yesterday, I would have been much more depressed than I am today. And reason being is I met yesterday one of the Afghan women who was evacuated last night. And she has only been in the US for 3 months. And she was, wow, right? I mean, you should invite her, frankly. She just got
Thank you for that.
she just got a fellowship at George Washington University. And here's what she said. She said, we worked, we rose, we gained our power, we gained our voice. And she said, and we aimed it. And suddenly the Western world saying, oh, there's a division between the urban elite and between the rural women in Afghanistan. And she's like, we're almost being punished for being the urban elite. So that's one thing, very good. She's like, IRC, she was 3 months in a US base, basically, and just got an apartment furnished from secondhand furniture and secondhand clothes. And she says, I was a woman with integrity and lived and bought all my furniture with my salary and made myself. And now I'm treated like, I'm attacked for being an urban elite, and I'm treated as secondhand citizen and I'm like, and no protection for me. But what she said, I said, do you have hope? Because frankly, I don't know where the hope in Afghanistan. I mean, the Taliban took over, for God's sake. And she said, I have hope. We have to fight. And she wasn't, when she says fight, she wasn't talking about army. She's like, we've got to negotiate, and we got to keep our voices going and force it upon them, our agency as women. We cannot delete our agency just because they took over and all the negotiations is going to be between men and men. She said, we need to be there. And yes, talk with them because we have to, but we are not going to hide on the side and be pushed on the side because, oh, we are women and they are uncomfortable with us. And she said, so I do have hope in pushing that. She said, as long as our voices stays alive and stays loud, I have hope. So the hope for me is we have evacuated, I mean, the women's effort evacuated only 250 women with their families. Others evacuate others. For me, this is the creme de la creme of society. This is the creme de la creme of intellectual, of women leaders. And we've got to, and this is something maybe you can all help in actually, because the job right now is to find positions for them where their voice is heard and maintained. The worst thing we can do is, give them no options so they become cashiers in some supermarket. Right? And here she was a minister or an amazing woman leader or a journalist, and there's nothing wrong with cashiers at supermarket. But we've got to maintain their voices. We've got to find fellowship positions for them, anything, to maintain their voices, because as long as their voices stays alive in the public, that's what she means is the fight. They're going to make it constantly uncomfortable to the Taliban, constantly uncomfortable, constantly pushing until you crack. How? I don't know, but I believe in what she's saying, and she gives me hope, and that she has such fierceness and energy. And a lot of the other women I met last night have that fierceness, like we are not going to give up. We're going to keep on fighting with our voice. So what we can do as women of different power and different influence, directly and indirectly, we really have to create a space for them. We really do. And they need it. And that's the way to fight right now, is to create space and ensure their voice is heard loud and clear, and that they are supported in that.
Thank you, Zainab. I know that we said 1 hour, but there's so much to learn from you and to share. Would you have time for one last question, or?
Let's do it.
Okay, great. So Tracy, it's yours.
Okay, so I'll try to be succinct. Zainab, fantastic. What enthusiasm. It's just, you're contagious. It's wonderful to feel really even just empowered just by listening to you. So thank you. I wanted to pick up on two interesting, I mean, the dozens of things that you mentioned, two things that really jumped out at me. One was this suggestion that part of the reason that things continue to move on and women play very little roles in politics and business and all of these leadership positions has a lot to do with our discourse, or the way that, you know, this different kind of a style. So I thought that was very interesting, and that's different in politics and in business and you know, and any other structure. I wouldn't even think of healthcare. It jumped to my mind that the message, the way we've delivered the message of get vaccinated has been so male driven that it's ironic. I think it's so silly because women are so in charge of health that it would be very, you know, a different message if it was received that way. But I'd like to pick up on that point mixed with your other story about this true sisterhood, which I think that you actually orchestrated, bringing these different diverse groups together under one kind of a tent. And it sparked in me this thought of this quadruple helix idea, that if you pick a problem that governments, universities, private sector, and NGOs all have in common, then the likelihood of something happening through that quadruple helix approach, they all have their different approaches to that problem, but they all have interest in it, right? So I was wondering, you know, that seems to be what some of the other questions that came up from Missy and Hala were getting at, is this kind of points of commonality, which I think is this really connector between all of the things that you've mentioned, is using women as a base of being the main connector. If you said, look, we all have different ways, you know, many roads to Rome, a lot of ways we can approach this problem in Afghanistan, or this problem of climate change, or this other problem. We all have different specialty areas, but the one point maybe we'd agree to sort of elevate in a hierarchical fashion would be, you know, the point of commonality of being women and trying to support each other in that way, which you got at your last point about actually pooling funds. My question gets to wonder, to actually looking at your initial funders, and you talked about your microcredit financing. There were some people who already saw in you that vision or that ability to be able to channel that and use that directly. So my question is, who are these exemplary participants? Who are the people who've backed people? Is it just, are they individuals that have just, you know, put in their $10 as you were suggesting about the climate change, or are there companies who actually do see the huge benefits of supporting these types of initiatives? And so the question is who's actually, because, you know, oftentimes a lot of the programs do come down to the money. And so that's one thing. But I think your last point, which is not monetarily oriented, so two different questions. One is who's already backing this, and how can we get them, you know, nudge them even further. And the other is the non-monetary aspect of actually that support system that you were saying to provide, for example, this woman who's arrived from Afghanistan, but on an international basis now, I think there's a way that we can be a lot more in contact. Technology has provided these kinds of platforms. The ability to exchange ideas at an international level, I think is really powerful. So it makes your problem, as you say, it gets in people's face, and you can't let it go if we can give her a voice, for example. So two different questions, financing, but also these informal connectors that could be, what are some examples that you give us that would inspire us to do something about that?
I'll try to answer it. If I didn't get your question, so please correct me. this is, I think the first question is about Daughters for Earth, right? It's about the financing of Daughters for Earth. Is that, am I correct?
No, in general, at the very beginning, the introduction, there was
Right.
you talked about having the 120 million distributed in microfinancing things,
for
but then you
Women
gave the other
International
example
and-
of, yeah.
Yeah,
it
both
was
the
140
organizations.
Yeah, it was, well, at Women for Women, in both cases, by the way, I believe that we're living in the era of the people, right? And I really, really believe in raising a lot of small funds and making it possible, not raising, and making it possible for every citizen to participate in that. I don't believe philanthropy should be only reserved to the rich. And, you know, philanthropy is something that is accessible to each one of us. So in both models, whether it is Women for Women that raised $146 million, not in microcredit loans, in actual direct aid and credit loans, right? But most of it is in direct aid. That came from people who gave $30, from women who gave $30 a month for 1 year to help one woman, and most of them renewed. There was a 93% of renewal. That happened, and it's the same with Daughters for Earth. Any woman can come $10 a month, right? That happened from park rangers, from police women, from like, I mean, my proudest moments. And by the way, the first 7 years, it happened from every woman, right? Then Oprah picked it up, the Oprah Winfrey Show picked it up. And then I got on the show 10 times. And frankly, every time I got on the show, we raised between $2 to $5 million, which had a 93% renewal rate, you know, so it was a beautiful experience, you know. But for the first 10 years, it was every woman who gave money, right? And then the organization became more popular. Actually, for the first 15 years, it was every woman who gave money. And then the organization became popular. We're getting a lot of media, all of that. And then Angelina Jolie joined, and Michael Bloomberg joined, and all of that. And they raised a lot of money. But for me, the money was still, and the majority of the money was distributed across all class and socioeconomic background, if you may, at a small rate. And I still believe that this is the way to go in our philanthropy for two reasons, you know, because that's the power of the people, because then it is it has a powerful message. That my favorite story is Angelina Jolie announced to support 500 women in some conference, and you know, I'm excited, it's Angelina Jolie, and then I go to the bathroom, you know, afterwards, and you know, was washing my hand, and the woman who distributed the tissues in the bathroom in one of the hotels here in New York City saying, "Oh my God, are you with Women for Women? I am a sponsor." And then the fact that that woman is giving $30 a month, and Angelina Jolie is giving, okay, not $30, but I don't know, you know, $500,000, that's the same. That amount on our lives is the same. We have different amount of money, but the impact on us is the same, right? So that is, for me, my dedication is the power of the people, and the power making accessible to philanthropy is not Melinda Gates and all, I mean, which I respect and love, but why make it only that this is where all have our own power in our own way, right? So that's one thing. And that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the premise of how I operate, basically. And the second question, which is, tell me about that.
About leadership, was that?
Yeah, just also on an international scale of support systems that can be offered to these to different groups or these individuals. For example, the woman that you mentioned in Afghanistan and others. Have you seen, this is not necessarily a money thing, but it's actually giving them platforms for exchange, and also moral, just support systems, you know, and letting them know that they're not alone in what they're doing, for example.
And money. You know, I mean, here's what we're right now, one of our biggest concerns. So we got, you know, these women out. Most of them came with their carry-on suitcase. The woman I met yesterday, she said, I had only a carry-on suitcase, and I looked at my house and saying, what do I pick up? She picked up her certificates, you know, and one dress. I mean, I'm tearing up. One dress, her Afghan national dress. You know, she said, because that's going to always remind me of my heritage. And she was wearing that one dress yesterday. It's a beautiful, like it's a fancy, nice dress, but she picked up that one dress and her computer, right? And I learned, you know, most of these women, when we were evacuating them, they wear their wedding dresses. I mean, as if they're going to a wedding party, because that's how they disguise themselves in the evacuation. If the Taliban pick them up, they're like, oh, we're going to a wedding. And so here they are actually wearing the best dresses. It's so emotional, you know, going to the airports and fearing for their lives, but the persona is that I'm worrying, oh, don't worry, I'm going to a wedding, you know. Here's what we need. It's when I say it's money. So we got them to safety right now. So they are in Albania or US base or some, you know, new apartments old apartments rather in throughout America, right? When I mean money, it's not necessarily money to pay for their clothes and all of that. This is actually taken care of. We've raised enough funds to take care of their clothes and their needs and their food, and just to set them up and give them a breathing room for the first 6 months to a year of their lives, right? What we do need, right, but that's basic. I mean, everyone in here is an educated woman. Imagine if all of that is stripped away from you and you're depending on $25 a day to buy your food. Like
Yeah.
It hurts your integrity, right?
Yes.
What we're looking for is basically opportunities to place them in professional settings, think tanks, universities, schools, whatever it is. And so that's what I mean is money, is that a lot of these things is like, you know, either they have the budget or we raise that budget, but we are looking for is that placement, fellowships, teachings, whatever it is. It's really, really needed, really, really needed. I mean, and they're all scrambling saying, what do I do now? Oh my God, how do I keep my brain going? You know, these were ministers and journalists and important women. So that's what we really, really need. I mean, beside, you know, meeting with them, of course, and besides, you know, give them opportunity to speak. They do need the opportunity to speak. They do need the opportunity to be heard. These are all important, and we need to find, and we need support. All of us, we're trying to do that. I'm doing that informally, to find ways where we're not only asking them to come and invite, but we're really finding a way to, you know, address the reality that we don't talk about in this, you know, Zoom call, which is, you know, people have to earn a living, people have to have a decent income just so they can have integrity in their lives. So that's what we need to address in here. And we're trying. I mean, this is about knocking doors, you know, and calling everyone we know, do you have an opportunity? And if you know anybody, then we can at least, we know where these women, we know where they are, we can figure out the positions for them. So, but we do need these opportunities being carved up for them.
Thank you so much, Zainab. Really, thank you for the message of hope, and thank you for the work that you do that has touched and transformed the lives of women and girls. It's a very important work that you do. So I just want to say that if anyone here who wants to help Zainab can go to Women for Women International or Daughters for Earth to make a contribution and to see how you can help. And the other thing that I want to point out before we leave is Zainab is also the author of several books, which she mentioned earlier. I think her latest is Freedom is an Inside Job. So if you have not got your hand on it, please do. Her other two books were Escape from Tyranny, Growing Up in the Shadow of Saddam, and if you knew me, you would care. So once again, I want to thank you really, Zainab, for this time that you've given us, and for the message that you've shared with us. Is really inspiring, and I do believe that you will definitely get support from this group today to advance your work. So thank you once again on behalf of the Women's International Forum.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Sally, for making it possible.
Thank you, Sally.
And you know what? I do honestly, I just want to leave you with this whole thing that we together shall make this century. We have to, we will. the feminine century. What is at stake is our own humanity. It's not even women, it's our own humanity is at stake, you know. And so I look forward to, as Rumi says, meeting you in the fields.
Absolutely.
You know, meeting you in the field and making that possible. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.